Lafayette, Louisiana, spring of 2000. It's just after midnight and a 2-year-old boy is screaming. His mother, Andrea, runs down the hallway of their old Arcadian house on West St. Mary Boulevard. She finds her child on his back. He's kicking and clawing at the covers like he's trying to kick his way out of a coffin. Heads thrashing side to side, and he's saying words a 2-year-old boy really shouldn't know. Airplane crash, plane on fire, little man can't get out. He says it over and over again. Airplane crash, plane on fire, little man can't get out. His father, Bruce, walks in and just stops. This guy's a corporate executive, a problem solver, the go-to guy who can fix anything. But standing in his son's doorway, he's paralyzed because these aren't random words. They're too specific. They're too desperate. And they don't stop. Happens 4 or 5 times a week for months. This little boy screams himself awake, describing a plane crash, a fire, and a man trapped inside a cockpit who can't get out. Now, the pediatrician says it's night terrors. It's normal, they'll pass. They don't. The 2-year-old eventually tells his parents specific details of a past life that go beyond coincidence. It's beyond chance or happenstance. Now, this information will drop into the lap of a family in Louisiana who has no connection to any of it. And this is just one case. At the University of Virginia, inside one of the most prestigious medical schools in America, there's a research division that's been collecting cases just like this for almost 60 years. Over 2,500 of them. And what they found is harder to dismiss than you'd think or want. I'm John Genoa, and you're watching America's Strangest History, coming at you from the great state of Vermont. The following are true stories of events that I can only describe as remarkable. This is the Reincarnation Files. Stay with me. So, the University of Virginia, Charlottesville, founded by Thomas Jefferson, and since 1967, inside its School of Medicine, there's been a research division studying whether human consciousness survives bodily death. Now, it's not a side project. This is a dedicated research division inside UVA's Department of Psychiatry. It's called the Division of Perceptual Studies, and it's been operating for around 60 years. So how did we get here? Well, it starts with a man named Ian Stevenson. And by the late 50s, Stevenson's a respected mainstream psychiatrist. 60 publications in the medical and psychiatric literature, and in 1957, he becomes chairman of UVA's Department of Psychiatry and Neurology. Chairman, the guy running the department. Now, the following year, 1958, the American Society for Psychical Research announces an essay contest in honor of William James. The topic is paranormal mental phenomena and their relationship to the survival of the human personality after bodily death. Got that? Heavy stuff. Stevenson mentioned an interest in parapsychology when he was interviewed for the chairman position, and when he came across scattered reports of people claiming memories of previous lives, like books, magazines, newspapers, he pulls 44 of these cases together, he analyzes them as a group, then he writes a paper. He wins the contest. It's published in 1960, and he's not planning to investigate any of this himself. He's running a department, he's treating patients, he's conducting other research. But then he gets a phone call from Eileen Garrett, head of the Parapsychology Foundation. She's heard about a case in India, similar to the ones Stevenson wrote about, and she offers to pay his expenses to go investigate. He says yes. And by the time he gets on the plane, he knows about 4 or 5 cases in India and 2 in nearby Sri Lanka. He figures to go check them out. He finds 25 cases in 4 weeks in India alone. Then he goes to Sri Lanka for a week and finds 7 more. These are young children, 2 to 3 years old, spontaneously describing lives they say they lived before. Now, many of them describe how they died, and their deaths are almost always violent or sudden. Some of these kids say that they were strangers in another location and show emotional longing for the previous family. And when people go to that other location, they find that someone whose life matches the details the child gave had in fact died. Stevenson's hooked. I'm hooked. And then comes the money. Chester Carlson. If you don't know that name, you may know his invention. Carlson invented the Xeroxing process, like the Xerox Corporation. His wife Doris got him interested in parapsychology and life after death research, and after reading Stevenson's essay, Carlson contacts him and offers financial support. Stevenson says no at first. He's too busy. Eventually, he agrees to accept a donation to buy a tape recorder. That's it. a tape recorder. But Carlson keeps funding him and eventually leaves a bequest that makes it possible for Stevenson to create an entirely new field of research. In 1963, Stevenson takes a sabbatical to write his first book. He's documenting every case with painstaking detail, listing every person he interviewed. He's building tables with each statement a child made about a previous life that is matched against verification from a deceased individual's actual life. Now, the book's called 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. It's published in 1966. And the reviews? The American Journal of Psychiatry says the cases are recorded in such detail as to persuade the open mind that reincarnation is a tenable hypothesis. Got that? The chairman of psychiatry at a major American university just published a book arguing that reincarnation deserves serious scientific investigation, and instead of backing off, he doubles down. In 1967, Stevenson steps down as chairman of the department to devote himself full-time to the research. So, he walked away from the chairmanship, and UVA lets him set up a small research division inside the department to continue his work. And that division is still there today, by the way. From 67 on, this guy's traveling over 50,000 miles a year investigating cases. India, Sri Lanka, Brazil, Alaska, Lebanon, Turkey, Burma, England. He publishes 4 volumes of case studies for the University Press of Virginia between 1975 and 1983. The reviewer in JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, says Stevenson has collected a detailed series of cases in which the evidence is difficult to explain on any other grounds. And he adds that he's placed on the record a large amount of data that simply can't be ignored. Now, sadly, the data was in fact ignored by most mainstream science, but not all of it. In 1977, Eugene Brody, editor of the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease, publishes one of Stevenson's papers. It generates over 1,000 reprint requests from scientists around the world. Brody then devotes most of an entire issue of the journal to Stevenson's work, and one of the commentaries in that issue is written by psychiatrist Harold Leaf. And Leaf says this about Stevenson: either he's making a colossal mistake, or he'll be known as the Galileo of the 20th century. And Stevenson didn't stop. He kept going for 40 years. By the time the division matured, they compiled over 2,500 cases of children who reported memories of previous lives. Every case is coded across 200 variables. 70% of the previous lives ended in violent or unnatural death. And 70% of the cases that were investigated were solved, meaning that they were matched to an actual deceased person. They're contacted by over 100 families per year. This is the institution. This is what's been operating inside UVA's medical school since 1967. And what they found over those 6 decades, well, that's what we're here to talk about. Hexham, England, May 5th, 1957. 2 girls are walking to church with a friend on the pavement when a driver runs her car up onto the sidewalk and hits them. 11-year-old Joanna Pollock and her 6-year-old sister Jacqueline are killed immediately. Their parents, John and Florence, are destroyed. Now, John Pollock believed in reincarnation for years. Florence did not. She's a Christian, no interest in the concept, doesn't believe it can happen. After the girls are killed, John becomes convinced that they'll be reborn into the same family as twins. And on October 4th, 1958, Florence gives birth to 2 girls, Jillian and Jennifer. Blood group analysis confirms they're monozygotic, so identical twins, and Jennifer, the younger twin, born with 2 birthmarks. One on her forehead near the root of her nose, matching a scar Jacqueline got when she fell in a bucket at age 3. The injury required 3 stitches. She also has a dark mole on her left wrist, matching the mole that Jacqueline had in the exact same spot. No other member of the family had a mark there. Jillian, no birthmarks at all. Now think about what that means. These are monozygotic twins. Same egg, same DNA. Genetics can't explain why one identical twin has 2 birthmarks matching the younger dead sister's mark, and the other twin has none. It can't. That's biology, it's not opinion. The family moves from Hexham to Whitley Bay when the twins are about 4 years old. The twins never go back. They're never told about their father's views on reincarnation. Florence insists on that. All they know about their dead sisters is that they went to heaven. But between the ages of 3 and 7, the twins start talking. Jillian describes Joanna's life. Jennifer describes Jacqueline's life. They recognize places and objects they've never seen. Stevenson documents 6 statements and 5 recognitions in this case file, and the parents overhear the twins talking to each other about an accident that killed Joanna and Jacqueline. Now the toy recognition. The Pollocks packed up Joanna and Jacqueline's old toys in a cardboard box and stored them in the loft out of sight. Nobody told the twins about them. And when the girls were about 4, John suggests they give the twins some of the old toys. 2 dolls and a toy ringer are left outside the twins' bedroom door. It's Florence who witnesses what happens next. Jennifer picks up the dolls and says, "Oh, that's Mary. And this is my Suzanne. I haven't seen her for a long time." Then she turns to Jillian and says, "And there's your ringer." She correctly named both toys, names only the dead sisters knew. She correctly assigned the ringer to the older sister. Then there's the phobias. Both twins develop an intense fear of cars. One day they're playing in the yard behind the house. It's backed by a lane used for parking, and John Pollock hears hysterical screaming. He runs out and finds them crouched in a corner. They're huddled in each other's arms, repeating, "The car, the car, it's coming at us." Both twins also look to their maternal grandmother for care and for guidance instead of Florence. It's curious, unless you happen to know that during Joanne and Jacqueline's lives, Florence was working and the girls were largely raised by their grandmother. By the time the twins were born, Florence wasn't working anymore. She was home full time. The twins had no reason to prefer their grandmother unless something else was going on. And there's more. Jillian was more mature, more independent, more generous. Jennifer followed Jillian's lead, exactly matching the dynamic between the 11-year-old Joanna and 6-year-old Jacqueline. Jillian liked costumes and little plays, just like Joanna, and when it came to holding a pencil, Jillian held it properly from the start. Jennifer grabbed it with her fist, the way Jacqueline had. Jacqueline's teacher tried to correct this and failed. Jennifer kept holding the pencil that way until age 23. Stevenson studied this case from 1963 to 1985, over 2 decades. And even the skeptic Ian Wilson, who personally investigated the Pollocks and wrote a book challenging Stevenson's work, admitted something remarkable. He wrote that if everything happened the way John described, then something not yet within the understanding of 20th century science would seem to have been at work. That's the skeptic talking. Wilson raises a fair point. John Pollock believed in reincarnation and couldn't be considered an unbiased observer. Stevenson himself gave the case only an intermediate rating for that very reason. But Florence didn't believe. And Florence is the one who witnessed the boy's recognition. And what about the birthmarks? Nobody's belief system put those there. That's monozygotic twins with different physical markings matching a dead sibling's scars. Genetics can't do that. Coincidence can, I suppose. But riddle me that. So how does this actually work? How does a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia investigate a reincarnation claim? Because that's what separates this from the nonsense out there. There's a method. Stevenson didn't just collect anecdotes, he built a forensic research protocol, and it starts with the child. A family contacts UVA usually because the kid starts saying things that don't make sense. Names, places, descriptions of people and events that have no business knowing. The children are almost always between the ages of 2 and 5 years old when this starts. So the first thing the investigator does is interview the family. Every person who heard the child make a statement. Every first-hand witness. Not second-hand, not hearsay. I'm talking first-hand. Who heard it? When they heard it? What exactly did the child say? And whenever possible, a written record of the child's statements is made before any attempt at verification. Got that? They write down what the kid said first, then they go and see if it matches anyone who actually lived and died. That's how you do science. Then comes the verification. If the child's given a name, a location, specific details about a death, investigators go to that location. They interview the family of the deceased person, they check the death records, autopsy reports, police records, medical files, and Stevenson built tables for every case. Each statement the child made gets its own row with the informant who reported it and the person who verified whether it matched the deceased individual's actual life. It's painstakingly dry, and it's exactly what you'd want from a researcher claiming to study something this provocative. By the time the division had 2,000 cases coded and entered into their database, every case was measured across 200 variables. Tucker even developed a strength of case scale. He scored each case on the number of verified statements, the presence of birthmarks or birth defects matching the wounds of the previous person, the behaviors the child showed, and the distance between the two families, because distance is a factor here. If the kid's family lived next door to the deceased person's family, that's one thing. If they're in a different city, a different state, a different country with no prior connection, that's something else entirely. And the strongest cases are exactly that. Two families previously unknown to each other, separated by distance, and the child's statements match. Now, what does the data actually show? We covered the numbers in the beginning, but there's more going on here than just memories. 36% of the children in a series of 387 cases showed phobias directly related to how the previous person died. And these phobias showed up early, sometimes before the children even started talking about the previous life. Stevenson described a girl in Sri Lanka who resisted baths so violently as a baby that 3 adults had to hold her down. Now, by 6 months old, she also showed a marked phobia of buses. She later described a life of a girl in another village who'd been walking along a narrow road between flooded paddy fields. She stepped back to avoid a bus, fell into the floodwater, and drowned. So in this case, the phobia came first, the explanation came later. Then there's the play. In 278 cases, almost a quarter of the children engaged in play related to the previous person's occupation, play that was unusual in their families and had no role model. One boy became so wrapped up in playing biscuit shopkeeper that he fell behind in school. A girl in India who described a life as a sweeper not only enjoyed sweeping, she happily cleaned up after her younger brothers, much to the surprise of her Brahmin parents. The behaviors match, the phobias match, the birthmarks match, and the statements, when verified, match. So what do the skeptics say? It's a fair question. The loudest critique comes from Professor C.T.K. Shary. It's an Indian philosopher and parapsychologist who argues that the cases are cultural artifacts. His position is that in cultures with deep beliefs in reincarnation, families produce these cases either intentionally or by some unconscious suggestion. The child picks up on those cues, the parents reinforce them, and the community validates the whole thing. It's a serious argument, and it's true that the easiest cases to find are in cultures that already believe in reincarnation, like India, Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand. But Stevenson anticipated this. In 1983, he published a paper on 79 American cases. He compared them to the Indian cases and found that while fewer of the American children made verifiable statements, the cases resembled the Indian ones in almost every other way. Age of onset, content of statements, related behaviors, and many of these American cases took place in families with no belief in reincarnation whatsoever. Then there's Paul Edwards, philosopher, who wrote an entire book called Reincarnation: A Critical Examination. Edwards argues that the whole thing was methodologically flawed, that Stevenson asked leading questions. His visits were too brief and that too much time elapsed between the events and the investigation. Now, some of those points are fair. Stevenson himself acknowledged the limitations. He was adamant that the word proof never be used as evidence. He said no single case compelled a belief in reincarnation, but he also said, and this is important, that he considered reincarnation to be the best explanation for the stronger cases, specifically where the two families were previously unknown to each other, where a written record of a child's statement is made before verification, and where the medical records document a close similarity between the child's birthmarks and wounds on the body of a previous individual. Tucker puts it another way. He says we're always looking to refute as much, if not more, than we're looking to verify. And remember, he investigated 3 cases with Stevenson personally. Stevenson was impressed by one, judged one unsolved, and dismissed the third as almost certainly wishful thinking on the mother's part. This is a research division inside a medical school that's been building a forensic database for 6 decades. They're coding every case across 200 variables, publishing in peer-reviewed journals, and throwing out the ones that don't hold up. And over 2,500 cases later, the data is still there. So back to Lafayette, Louisiana, the boy from the beginning, James Leininger. What I'm going to walk you through now is how a 2-year-old's nightmares turned into one of the most well-documented cases in the UVA database. The nightmares start in the spring of 2000. 4 or 5 times a week, James screams himself awake. Same spiel. Airplane crash, plane on fire, little man can't get out. His parents try everything. Andrea starts sleeping near James's room so she can get to him faster. Bruce tells him to just stop. That didn't seem to work either. Then one night in late August, James starts talking about the nightmare while he's awake. They're reading Dr. Seuss and James says, "Mama, little man's airplane crash on fire." Andrea gets Bruce. They sit on the bed and start asking questions. Who's this little man? Me. No hesitation. Do you remember the little man's name? James. Andrea's confused. She thinks he's just saying his own name. And Bruce decides to take over. Do you remember what kind of airplane the little man flew? A Corsair. A Corsair. That's a World War II fighter plane. This kid can't even say Hobby Lobby. He says Hobby Wobby, but he knows the name of a specific World War II aircraft. Now Bruce asks, where did your airplane take off from? Answer, a boat. Do you remember the name of the boat? Answer, Natoma. Bruce tells Andrea to get a pen. He's convinced this is a fantasy and he's going to prove it. Natoma, huh? Sounds pretty Japanese. James gets annoyed, says, no, it's American. This is a 2-year-old standing up to his father over the name of a ship. So Bruce goes to the office, fires up the computer, and Googles Natoma. 1,000 hits. Lake Natoma Hotel in California, Natoma Restaurant in Ohio, a town in Kansas called Natoma. Then he finds a reference to a ship. Turns out to be a geodetic survey vessel, not an aircraft carrier. Bruce keeps scrolling, and he finds it. USS Natoma Bay CVE-62. It's a World War II escort carrier that fought in the Pacific. The kid was right. It was American. A few weeks later, James gives a second name, Jack. Andrea asks, was Jack James's friend? Answer, he was a pilot too. Jack Larson. Bruce starts searching, but he's looking for a dead man. He assumes Larson was the one that was killed in the nightmare. He doesn't yet realize that James has been saying all along that he's the one in the plane. Remember? Who's the little man? Me. What's the little man's name? James. Andrea says she asked him 30 times what his name was in that dream, and every time, James. Then comes the map. Bruce orders a book called The Battle of Iwo Jima in 1945. It's a Christmas gift for his father. One Saturday morning, James climbs into his lap and flips through it. They get to a page of a map of Iwo Jima on one side and an aerial photo of Mount Suribachi on the other. James points to the picture and says, "That's where my plane was shot down." Bruce says, "What? My airplane got shot down there, Daddy." He's 2.5 years old. A week later, Bruce calls the Natoma Bay Association. A veteran confirms that a pilot named Jack Larson did serve on Natoma Bay during the Iwo Jima operation. Larson, as it turns out, survived the war. So Jack Larson wasn't the dead pilot. He was the witness. In September 2002, Bruce attends his first Natoma Bay reunion, tells the veterans he's writing a book about the ship. He's still not ready to tell them about his son. And at that reunion, he learns only one pilot from Natoma Bay was killed during the entire Iwo Jima operation. A 21-year-old from Pennsylvania named James M. Houston Jr. Around that same time, James starts drawing pictures. Battle scenes, ships, planes, over and over. His parents say that he drew hundreds of them, and he starts signing them James 3. Bruce and Andrea ask him about it. I'm the third James. I'm James 3. Not because he's 3 years old. He kept signing it James 3 after he turned 4. James Houston was a junior. That's the dead pilot. That would make James Leininger the third James. Then Andrea asks if the little man had any brothers or sisters. James said he had a sister named Annie and another one named Ruth. Ruth was 4 years older than Annie, who was 4 years older than him. Correct. All of it was correct for James Houston's family. Now, Bruce tracks down Ann Barron, that's Houston's surviving sister. She's 84 years old. She confirms the family details and sends photos. 2 of them shows James Houston standing in front of a Corsair. No Corsairs ever flew off Natoma Bay. Houston was killed flying an FM-2 Wildcat. That's what's been bugging Bruce for years. The kid said Corsair, but the records say Wildcat. Turns out, before joining VC-81 on Natoma Bay, Houston had been part of a squadron called VF-301, the Devil's Disciples. Now, their job was to test fly the modified Corsair for carrier use. So James was right. Houston did fly a Corsair, just not the day he died. Then Bruce finds the eyewitnesses. The aircraft action report from VC-81 says none of Natoma Bay's own pilots saw Houston's plane get hit. But there were other planes in that attack from the USS Sergeant Bay. Bruce tracks down one of Sergeant Bay's veterans. One of them wrote down in his memoir that he saw a fighter from Natoma Bay take a direct hit on the nose. Another said that he was so close to Houston's plane that they made eye contact just before Houston's engine was hit and the plane was engulfed in flames. A third veteran was interviewed for ABC Primetime. He said, "I saw the hit. I would say it was hit head on. Yeah, right in the middle of the engine." And what did James tell his mother? "Mama, before I was born, I was a pilot, and my airplane got shot in the engine, and it crashed in the water, and that's how I died." James said that before anyone knew who James Houston was, before the Natoma Bay reunion, before the Sergeant Bay eyewitness, before Ann Barron, before any of it. Jim Tucker at UVA investigated this case, and the documentation trail is real. The Strange Mysteries TV segment, filmed in 2002, before Houston was identified, records James saying he flew off Natoma, flew a Corsair, was shot down by the Japanese, and died at Iwo Jima. Now this is all confirmed. Jack Larson's flight path is shown next to Houston's in the aircraft action report. He was right there when Houston went down, March 3rd, 1945. And for some unknown reason, a little boy in Louisiana knew. Now for Ryan Hammons. Different case, different state, same division at UVA. Muskogee County, Oklahoma, a boy named Ryan starts talking around age 4. He's telling his mother Cindy about a life in Hollywood. Not a kid playing pretend now. He's describing specific things, an agency, people changing their names, a big house with a swimming pool, traveling the world on large ships. He talks about dancing in New York on Broadway. He talks about a daughter and problems with an older stepdaughter who wouldn't listen to him. Says his address had rock or mount in it. Talks about a man he calls Senator 5, and he keeps saying he wants to go back. He's emotional about it. He's even crying sometimes. "Mommy, I just want to be me, not the old me." Now, Cindy's a Christian from a small town in Oklahoma. She has no frame of reference for this kind of thing. She searches the internet for days looking for somebody who might be able to help, and she finds Jim Tucker at UVA. Now here's where it gets interesting. Before Tucker even gets involved, something happens. Cindy's flipping through a library book about old Hollywood movies with Ryan, and they're trying to understand what he's talking about. They come to a photograph from a 1932 film called Night After Night. 6 men in the picture. Ryan gets excited, points to one of them and says, "Hey mama, that's George. We did a picture together. And mama, that guy's me. I found me." The man he's pointing to has no lines in the film. He's an uncredited extra, a nobody. And that's the problem. How do you identify an uncredited extra from a 1932 movie? Tucker gets the case. A TV production team hires an archival footage consultant named Katie Coe to figure it all out. She goes to the library of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, probably the largest film library in the world. She pulls everything on Night After Night. She finds a photograph. The same man, cigar in his mouth, bowler hat. On the back it says, "Marty Martin playing a racketeer in Paramount's Night After Night." Marty Martin, born in Philadelphia, 1905. He moved to New York, became a dancer on Broadway, moved to Hollywood, started as an extra. He became a dance director, then he became a talent agent. He set up the Marty Martin Agency representing clients like Glenn Ford. He was married 4 times. He became wealthy, big house with a swimming pool. The address? 825 North Roxbury. Remember Ryan said his address had rock or mount in it? He also said he knew a senator named Senator 5. Now Tucker checks the records. New York didn't have a Senator 5, but it did have a Senator Ives. Irving Ives, U.S. Senator from New York for 12 years in the late 40s and 50s. 5, Ives. A young child mixing those names makes sense. And when Tucker shows Ryan photos of 4 men, Ryan points to Senator Ives and says, "That's Senator 5, I'm sure." Marty Martin's daughter confirmed that the 2 men knew each other. She even had a photograph with them together. Then Tucker sits down with the daughter to review Ryan's statements. She'd only been 8 when Marty died in 1964, so there's a lot she didn't know. But statement after statement lined up. Ryan said he took girlfriends to see the ocean. There are photos of Marty with young women on the beach. Ryan said he smoked. Marty smoked cigars and had a monogrammed cigarette case. Ryan said his wife drove a black car. Marty's wife had a custom-made Rolls Royce. Ryan said he had an African-American maid. Marty and his wife had a number of them. Ryan said he bought coloring books for children. Marty's daughter confirmed he bought her coloring books. Ryan said he had a difficult relationship with an older stepdaughter. That's confirmed. Marty had 5 stepchildren and friction with the older one. Ryan even said that when he was a little kid, his family didn't have a TV in their house. Nobody did. And he was so excited when he got his first TV. A 6-year-old from Oklahoma understood that people in the 1920s didn't have televisions. Tucker published this case in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease. That's the same journal that devoted an entire issue to Stevenson's work back in '77. Now, Ryan's case does something that the others can't. A child identifies a specific person from a photograph, an uncredited extra that nobody ever heard of, and then gives details about that person's life that turn out to be accurate. So this can't be cultural contamination. This isn't a family that believes in reincarnation. This is a Christian family in Oklahoma with no connection to Hollywood, no knowledge of Marty Martin, and a 4-year-old boy who pointed to a picture and said, "That guy's me." And eventually Ryan lets it go. One night, Cindy walks into his room and finds that he's taken down all his wall decorations, his pictures of New York, the Iron Eiffel Tower. He says it's time to just be a regular kid. That's what happens in these kinds of cases. The memories fade, almost always by age 6 or 7. The children stop talking about it, they move on, and the files stay at UVA. So where exactly are we now? Well, we've got a research division inside UVA's medical school that's been operating for almost 60 years. It's founded by a man who walked away from the chairmanship of Psychiatry department to study this full time. It's funded by the inventor of the Xerox process. 2,500 cases, 200 coded variables, published in peer-reviewed journals, cases from India, Sri Lanka, Burma, England, and right here in the United States. Twins in England with birthmarks that genetics can't explain, a boy in Louisiana who knew the name of the aircraft carrier, a squadron, a dead pilot, and the man who was flying next to him when he was killed, all before anyone had identified who he was. A boy in Oklahoma pointed to an uncredited extra in a 1932 movie and said, "That guy's me," and then he described the man's life in detail. Now, Stevenson died in 2007. He was 88 years old. He'd been at this for 40 years, published thousands of pages of case documentation, and at the end, he said this: "Let no one think that I know the answer. I'm still seeking." Jim Tucker took it over, published a book called Before that became a New York Times bestseller. The division is still operating. It's still collecting cases. And let me connect a dot for you. We did a video recently on something called the gateway process. Just a note, check it out if you get a chance. In 1983, the U.S. Army commissioned a report by Lieutenant Colonel Wayne McDonald evaluating a conscious expansion program developed at the Monroe Institute. McDonald's conclusion, after reviewing the physics of holographic universe theory, quantum mechanics, and neuroscience, was that human consciousness can transcend space-time, and that consciousness survives bodily death. That was a classified Army intelligence report. What Stevenson and Tucker had been studying at UVA, using a completely different methodology, clinical casework with children, arrives at a structurally similar conclusion. Consciousness doesn't appear to be confined to the brain. And whatever's happening in these cases, it doesn't fit neatly into the materialist model. Stevenson never claimed proof. Tucker doesn't claim proof. They claim evidence. And after 2,500 cases, the evidence is harder to dismiss than anyone expected. The question isn't whether you believe in reincarnation. The question is why one of America's most prestigious universities has been quietly studying it for 60 years, and why almost nobody knows about it. What they found, after all those decades, all those cases, all those coded variables and verified statements and birthmarks that shouldn't be there, is that the data is still there. Nobody's debunked it. Nobody's explained it away. It's just sitting in a database inside a medical school at the University of Virginia, waiting for somebody to take it seriously. You tell me. I'm John Genoa. This is America's Strangest History. Thanks for watching.